Good day, everybody. You may notice that this video is a little bit late because this is probably going to be one of the most difficult videos I've probably ever done, and I've been having cold feet all weekend about it. Spent most of Saturday looking at properties out in the Buffalo area, so I'm trying to move out there. Sunday I had all day to record something, but here it is, midnight on Monday morning, and I'm just recording things now because I've been thinking all day on which angle I want to take on this particular topic, how I wanted to cover it, because it is a very difficult one. One that is not very easy to present, but I think it's important to present it because it's not very easy to present. So on a previous video, probably one of the most popular ones on my channel, and now since this incident has occurred in the middle of last week, there has been substantial growth in viewership of that particular video revolving around this individual because of this particular situation. Ragehound also did a video about them during the time in which the charges were brought against them. She had decided to take the video down in what she said are respects to the individual. I decided not to do that because I think it's very important that the record of which happened back then is maintained, so that people can understand the context of the situation when talking about modern topics, so talking about the latest unfortunate developments in this case. In that video, I'd made some tongue-in-cheek statements. None of it was as brutal or as disturbing as some of the statements obviously made towards an individual who, towards this individual. But who I'm talking about, so I'm not talking in coded language because that's not a journalist's job to talk in coded language, has to do with RC Fox. So in the previous video, if you haven't watched the full thing, you may watch it up here. Please note that I did put a card to Ragehound's information regarding that in that original video, but she has since taken that down, so that card will no longer work. But long of the short is that RC Fox was brought up on charges for having child photographs of an adult nature on their devices. So in that video I did, as I said, it was slightly, reactionary, somewhat tongue-in-cheek, in regards to the whole, I said that, I wasn't going to make a video every time an elephant farted on the case, but I would present any updates as needed. Because furries, we deal with adversity using humor sometimes. We don't take ourselves too seriously. And in this case, they were photographs on a computer more than they were actual violations, but that doesn't excuse it because somebody took those photographs and actually harmed kids to get those photographs. So that being said, it's still a very reasonable thing to be punished for, very reasonable crime to be punished for. That being said, I can't even remember the dialogue. See, this is why this is difficult. I said that I wouldn't, comment if an elephant didn't fart on this thing. But unfortunately, this, in this case, there is a major update, and that is that a news report came out of Pennsylvania, which can be found in the description below, that this individual or that RC Fox, the person who played RC Fox, had taken their own life northwest of Pittsburgh, along Route 51, I believe that said, near McKinney Road. They had taken their own life. They had parked the car on the side of the road, and it seems like they had used some sort of chemical agent, or they had created some sort of poisonous gas or some sort of use of that, and had locked themselves in the car, and that's how they had decided to do it. Hazmat teams were called in, and RC Fox is no longer with us. So this news actually was sort of broken by Busey Badger, and the hot take on it, or at least the hot take on it was, the fandom killed this person, or some sort of like, not letting the criminal justice system do its due process and all this other stuff. So there was some emotion to it. Busey is a lawyer, so of course he has a very personal stake in ensuring that the justice system maintains itself, and that, mob mentality is coming from no pun intended, with a person in a kangaroo suit who's half Italian. But the mob mentality might not be healthy to discussions of criminal activity, which is fair enough. But there's a little bit more information on this, which is why this video took a little longer to process than normal. Because unlike most situations where I can get information just from Twitter, and usually I don't have like really close secondhand information, I do have an anonymous source here who has provided me more information about the situation at hand, and I'll discuss the information that they had provided me. I had verified that they do seem to have connections with the individual in question, and so I do trust that their information is accurate. So what happened here, and this was actually common information, is that RC Fox took a plea bargain. In other words, they were going to be charged with the criminal acts in hand of having possession of this of this child exploitative photographs on their electronic devices. And because they were going to be charged with that, and they took that plea bargain, they were going to basically be going to jail for that crime. From what I've heard from my source, there was buyer's remorse in that bargain. That probably under duress, RC Fox had taken the plea bargain under duress. And eventually their defense lawyer said that, well, they can make the argument that, that the information or the bad photos on their computer were not given to them knowingly, where it's not downloaded and put on their computer knowingly. They were going to use the "I didn't know that it was downloaded" defense. It seems to be a common defense in these cases. I can't verify whether that's true or false, but my source, who is knows the RC Fox personally, says that RC Fox claims that those photos were not. He did not knowingly download those photos onto his device. That is his claim. That is his defense, and he wanted to have that defense, but he had when that defense was presented to him. I don't know what the details are, but apparently it wasn't. He didn't feel he had enough money or enough stamina in order to do that, and unfortunately, he had already taken the plea. So because he had already taken the plea, he was going to have to appeal, and in order to appeal, it would have cost him $25,000 to appeal the process. He didn't have that kind of money, so his fate was sealed. And I think he also, from what my source tells me, is that RC Fox believed that his mother, who works in primary education facilities, meaning they were a school teacher, would have had their job impacted by their son going to jail for connections with child exploitation. he was under the impression, the source was under the source said that R.C. Fox had claimed that if he went to jail for it, there's Pennsylvania law that his mother could lose her job because of it. I tried to do a little research myself into that because it seemed kind of like a sort of unbelievable law. It's like that you're responsible for your adult kid and what they're responsible for. Now that impacts your job. So I did look into it, and I did find a recent law that said that an individual who is charged with crimes against children, you know, can't serve in a primary facility or anywhere near children or in a facility that deals with children in any way, shape, or form if they've been charged with such crimes as an individual. But I didn't find anything that said people related to those individuals. Obviously, if Busey is a lawyer for that area, if he wants to like stipulate if that's a law or not, I don't think it is. And I couldn't find any evidence of that. If he was given that impression, or if he had that impression, then, you know, he was making decisions off of false pretenses. Which is unfortunate, because people sometimes are given bad information and they will make very rash decisions based on bad information. Which is why having good nonfiction presenters is very important. It's important that you have all the facts on your plate before you make a decision. So, that being said, you know, there was one thing I have to like discuss here, and that is what it sounds like here is that this person made a plea bargain under duress. And quite honestly, and this is where it's going to go slightly into opinion territory, as far as plea bargaining goes, I believe it's unethical in particular circumstances. From my understanding, the plea bargain was originally designed to help take down larger criminal organizations before there was the whole RICO law thing. And even with the RICO law thing, plea bargaining to take down larger criminal organizations is actually a very useful thing. To me, that's the ethical way to use the plea bargain. You have a perp sitting before you, and you say, well, you committed a crime. I'm going to give you an offer of reducing your sentence if you help provide us evidence of the guy you worked for. Like when you committed this crime, we know that you're working for a crime syndicate. If you can give us some good, solid evidence that we can use against your boss or somebody on the equals chain, like somebody else in the chain link, you know, go ahead, we'll reduce your sentence. There's a lot of risk involved in that, obviously. If the person's powerful, like there could be retaliation against the snitch. But it's a tool that law enforcement can use. And to me, that's the only time that plea bargaining is ethical. The most modern type of plea bargain is for expedition purposes. Basically, the court systems are so bogged down and there's so few people taking on so many cases that in order to save time and money, the freaking court system will try to reduce the sentence of a perp if they just plead guilty. To me, it's unethical for many reasons. Number one, it capitalizes justice. Basically, a plea bargain is just that, a bargain. And it's ironic to me that, of all people, Deo was like, oh, well, he took a plea. Like, as if, like, but you know what that means, right? It's a plea bargain. It's basically the capitalization of justice, right? You're a self-proclaimed communist, all right? You should sort of know that plea bargaining is used to try and strong-arm the poor into, you know, just going to jail because it's easier for the state that way. Of course, in this case, we're fine with it because it was just some dude with, like, who is probably not too terrible off and all this stuff. But, you know, plea bargain has been used in a very shady manners, and particularly in this expedition process. Quite honestly, if R.C. Fox really didn't want to take a guilty plea and their defense lawyer let them take a guilty plea, and didn't stop them from doing it if they didn't want to actually take it, then the defense lawyer failed in their job, in my opinion. And that's unfortunate. So when dealing it with these expedited purposes, this is the reason I find it immoral, like completely immoral, is that it's not only a capitalist sort of thing, it causes inflation of sentencing. Because if plea bargaining becomes the standard in which we try to get a guilty verdict, what happens is that we inflate the amount of time that we punish people. So hey, you stole a candy bar, that's 1 year in prison. But if you plead guilty, we'll reduce that to 3 months. It's like, then why not just make it like 3 months in prison? That's petty larceny, right? So petty larceny, you'll get like a month in prison, right? But if you plead guilty, you'll get 2 months in prison, 2 months in prison for petty larceny or something. I don't know what the actual numbers are. But hey, if you plead guilty, we'll reduce that to 1 month. And then it's like, well, why wasn't it 1 month to begin with? If I'm guilty of it, I should be serving the time if I'm guilty of it, irregardless of whether I confess or not. Instead, if I plead guilty to it, I should have a better possibility for parole. That should be the thing. It's because I'm confessing, I'm still sentenced the same for the same crime. I should be offered a more aggressive parole thing because I'm being a good person and admitting I'm wrong. And but I could always act a fool in prison. So, let the parole board decide that. Let that be a factor in the parole. Don't let it be a factor in the amount of time that someone should do for a crime. So I guess I'm sort of rambling a bit on this whole nerdy thing, but so basically what I'm saying is it's inflation. So and that's the same in a financial sense, right? If I were the government and I said, I'm going to give everyone $7,500 that they can use to buy a house. I don't care who you are. I don't care what it is. Just, you want to go buy a house? Here's $7,500. Guess what happens to the market? Everyone increases their house price. Every seller increases their house price by $7,500 because they're like, hey, government's paying $7,500. I'm going to increase my selling point by $7,500 so that, because I know that the human being on the other end is not paying the $7,500. Similarly, when a plea bargain is expected to be used as a bargaining chip, you're going to inflate the amount of time that someone spends in jail, which is why we have such high sentencing rate. Like why we become an incarcerated society. So that's another factor. But the worst of all of it to me, is basically it's faithlessness. We believe in the system of justice except for we don't. And I'll go through some examples. Let's say I have a perp. I'm the prosecutor, I have a perp in front of me. I don't know whether they're guilty or not guilty. Whether or not they're guilty or not guilty, if I'm offering them a plea deal, I'm saying I don't have confidence that we're going to be able to nail this thing in court. I don't believe, I have no faith that I will be able to acquire the information needed to send that person to jail. I don't know if I have the evidence, so I'm going to use a plea deal to hope that there is that maybe we can get him in there for a little bit of time because I know he did it, even though I don't have the evidence necessary to convince a courtroom yet. So I don't have faith in the very institution that I'm part of. In both cases, whether the person is guilty or not guilty. Now let's look at it from the perspective of the other guy. If the perp is guilty and they take the plea, they have faith in the system. See how perverse that is? The person in the prosecution has no faith in the system. That's why they're offering the plea bargain. The person who's guilty and know they're guilty are like, well, they're going to probably find out some information I really don't want them knowing if they pursue this one charge I'm being pursued of, because I've done other crimes that I don't want them finding out when they're doing the evidence of this thing. So I'm going to take the plea bargain because I believe that the cops, if they do their job right, and the detectives, if they do their job right, are going to find out what I did wrong. I have faith in the justice system, therefore I'm taking the plea bargain. But what if the person's innocent? Well, then they too are faithless. And it's interesting and ironic to me that Busey had presented when he did his hot take on this whole thing. He was like, the Twitterverse and everybody else has no faith in the system. They have no faith in the system. And it's like, but here's the thing. Neither did R.C. Fox. Because if he really believed himself to be innocent of any wrongdoing, then he would have had faith that the court system would have found him innocent. He would have had faith that he didn't have to take his own life to get out of it. Or that he had to take a plea bargain. Because him taking the plea bargain is like, well, I'm going to jail anyway, so I might as well try and get a reduced sentence out of it. I don't have faith in the system to process it. Right? It's like, well, you could say that the people on Twitter don't, but the thing is, like, they're always going to exist. People who want swift and angry justice are always going to exist, irregardless of it. And that is why it's important to have a strong judiciary. That is true. But to say that, to wish upon a world where nobody gets upset or angry about injustices or wrongdoings being done by individuals is not going to happen, unfortunately. And it's not that's why I don't reply to comments or poo-poo people who make comments like burn in hell or anything like that, because they're emotional and they're making an emotional statement, and that's what they do. I'm not that way. Some minority of people aren't that way, but maybe they were wronged as a kid. Maybe they know somebody who was wronged as a kid. So they have a very personal take when it comes to anything in regards to these kind of crimes. And they're reacting on that emotion. They're venting. Venting is fine. You know what I mean? Venting, get it out there, get it out of your system, and hopefully, you let the due process happen. Because here's the thing, the freaking Twitterverse was all upset and angry about this guy too. And that variable didn't change. That variable didn't change for this guy. I did a video on him up here. This guy was accused of actually harming an actual child, along with a few of his friends, with friends like that who needs enemies. So, like Kenneth here was found innocent of doing this wrongdoing, and in fact, there was some the defense claimed that there was some ulterior motive when it comes to finances. So there's different variables between Kenneth here and R.C. Fox. They're both from the same state. They're both from the same. That's a variable that's the same. They're both charged in a crime that was about this. They're both furries. They both were impacted by the Twitter mob or whatever. Those factors are all the same. The difference is that this guy over here went to court and won. So, and on top of that, I think this guy has a little more green, because I think that was one of the defense things on his case, saying that this guy's friends, had harmed the kids, but the kids were trying to stretch it to include this guy because he has finances, and the parents were looking for a civil sort of thing. That was the defense thing, and the jury believed them. The jury believed the defense in this case, and this guy was found innocent. So, you know what? I put my foot in my mouth. I had made a video about the 3 individuals in this crime, and it was like and did all that stuff, and was like very disturbed by it, and put him on the same pedestal as the other guys who had either pled guilty, and a third guy I still don't know about. But at the end of the day, when the due process has been done and it's found that someone is innocent, it's done, right? There are still going to be people who don't trust the system, who are faithless in the system, just as the prosecution when they make a plea bargain to expedite things. But that is on them. That's not on other people. So at the end of the day, I think that R.C. Fox lost faith in themselves. They lost faith in the system. they felt themselves to, they really wanted to try and, fight for their innocence, but they lost faith in themselves and they took a plea which they should not have taken. And as Busey has mentioned in his Twitter account here, because the reduced sentencing can be very tempting. Here he shows like a pie chart with how the reduced sentencing, how the sentences is being reduced by the person there. And, the people who go to trial and are found guilty versus the people who plead, take a plea and take a reduced sentencing. It seems like when it goes to trial, there's a lower chance that you'll go to jail, but if you do go to jail, then there's a higher sentence rate. I think that's what he's trying to say. So it's basically, like I said, you're bargaining. You're bargaining for freedom, or you're bargaining, and you're weighing things like that. And for some odd reason, that's seen as fine. And Busey also mentions here about it happens. Yeah, sometimes innocent people take a plea bargain. It happens. It is what it is. Typically, this is something I've learned as I've grown up. This is something I've learned as I've become an adult and as I've grown into things. I've heard this term, it is what it is, all the time. And typically when a person uses that, it's saying, well, we're doing this because it is what it is. But whenever I hear that, I always think to myself, well, then it isn't what it should be. And if an innocent person is taking plea bargains because of the temptation of this, of the whole thing, then it's not a good system. In fact, the reduced sentencing for one's sins, a word popped into my head that sort of describes this whole thing perfectly. It's an indulgence. An indulgence, for those of you who are not in the know, is a word that was coined back before the Renaissance period, and in fact was the catalyst of the Renaissance period. One of the main catalysts of the Renaissance period was the theocracy, which was the Catholic Church at the time in Europe, was offering reduced sentencing, or basically, if the church found you committed some huge sin against the organization, against the church, they would excommunicate you. And basically, when you were excommunicated, there was this whole, implication that you were basically like second class. Like you instantly were no longer like a viable part of society if you were excommunicated from the church. And what they did is that if you breaded the butter, as it were, if you give them a little bread, give them a little scratch, maybe a little scratch here, a little scratch there, a little scratch in gold, you lube the stool a little bit. You come together, you give me some money, and we'll get you something called a indulgence, which is, you screwed around, you messed with the church, but hey, welcome back. You're welcome back. You give me a little money, a little bribe. What's it hurt? Buy this ticket to save your soul, kind of thing. And to me, when I see the plea bargain used in the expedition process of it's only used on this individual to try and pressure them into taking a reduced sentence, I'm reminded of that. And here is the biggest irony of the whole thing. When it comes to Protestantism versus Catholicism, basically this is the reason Protestantism existed, is because Martin Luther put down the 95 Theses that says this indulgences crap is wrong. It's immoral. It's like either you're a sinner or you're not a sinner, and only God himself can proclaim whether or not you're absolved of your sins. Yet we have our church over here going, hey, look, you're absolved of our sins because you bribed us with worldly wealth. So here we are again. We're taking indulgences and we're accepting it as part of our thing. We're accepting the fact that the prosecutor has no faith in the system in finding out whether or not somebody is guilty or not guilty or proving guilt. They have no faith in it. So in order to try to get the person back into society quicker, they're offering indulgences. But even worse, they're creating harsher punishment and harsher sentencing so that the plea bargain looks a lot more tantalizing to the person who's being offered it. You can get yours. You can go free from jail for your low price of $9.99. Woo! So it seems ironic to me that a lot of Protestants fled Europe during that time, because there was some contention during that time, and a lot of Protestants found themselves in a very harsh particular situation in those times. But hey, it went both ways, just as any conflict does. But a lot of people were like, we're not fighting, I'm just going to this new world, and we'll live out there. And sure, there's some jerks amongst the Protestants, just as there were amongst the Catholics. It happens. But it seems interesting to me that we have basically secularized the indulgence, and we're fine with it now. But we shouldn't be. In fact, I would say that if anything, my ultimate goal and my what I would love to see is that any plea bargaining that occurs that does not bring another perp into the fold, that if you're not pressing charges against another individual using the information of the person you plea bargained with, the plea bargain has no place in it. It should never have been that way. We should not be in this McDonald's justice system, because that, more than anything that the furry fandom did, is what killed R.C. Fox. Anyways, I think I've rambled on a long time about this, but, between, the whole thing with Busey poo-pooing us about whether I believe as far as what do I believe about R.C. Fox, it's irrelevant at this point. Whether or not his defense of himself was accurate or inaccurate, it's irrelevant. He's no longer amongst us. Was it worth a death sentence? I don't think so. Was it worth him taking his own life? I don't think so. But I respect the dead. And when I respect the dead, that means I respect the choices that they made in their life, even if that choice was to take their own life. They weighed upon the decision in front of them, and they saw that as their choice. That was their decision. They did it in an ethical manner. And good on them for doing it, because there are individuals in this world that are suicidal, but will take their own lives in ways that harm other people, where they don't care how many other people they take with them before they go. And this person was good enough to pull off to the side, make sure that they were isolated before releasing that toxin to end their own life. And I thank them for doing that. But anyways, at the end of the day, I guess this is, I'm going to get the hop out of here. I'm going to go to bed. It's very late. It's probably like 12:30 or 40 at this point. Anyways, leave a comment in the comment section if you want. I won't go through the other normal spiel, because I'm not like a freaking YouTuber who goes to Suicide Island and freaking exploits the dead for freaking clicks and views. I've noticed my subscriber count going up in the past freaking 48 hours, the past freaking half a week, and I really wish it was under better circumstances. I really do. I really wish that I really wish that freaking squid video about the squid werewolves or whatever it was and the Maskimals would grow. I'm glad that it's in the top 4 for sure, but I would really like good news to sort of trickle to the top of the crop instead of the difficult ones. But I guess it's part of the nature of the business, I suppose, that it's the most difficult moments that people want to have conversations about things. It's the very reason that Boozy Badger is part of our fandom, quite honestly. His article dealing with the whole sovereign citizen issue in the Rocky Mountain FurCon thing got him into the fandom, basically, and made him sort of an instant celebrity dealing with that situation. And I think because of the adversity and the very major emotional thing that caused. It is what it is, and but it isn't how it should be, right? And I wish I could make it. I wish I could make it better and make it change, but I have to cover what is important and what is, the thing that is, the news. And you can't always choose, because life has the good and it has the bad. And hopefully next week we'll cover something better. All right, I promise you. But anyways, I'm gonna get the hop out of here. Thank you very much for watching again, and I hope to see you again next week. And I promise, I can't promise, but I hope that it will be a more a lighter topic. Anyways, thank you.